At the edge of known space, far beyond the quiet colonies of the civilized galaxy, there was a dark region called Orion's Edge, a place wrapped in mystery, marked on star charts only by red warnings. Do not enter. Unexplained disappearances. For centuries, rumors spread among traders and smugglers of a ghost ship drifting there, silent and deadly, an old Terran warship from a forgotten war. Most thought it was a myth, something told to scare children or fresh recruits. But when three patrol ships from the Thalzor Dominion vanished without a trace, the whispers returned, louder than ever. Commander Varric, proud leader of the Dominion's forward fleet, scoffed at the tales. No ship, no matter how ancient, can destroy 3 modern destroyers, he told his officers with a cold smirk. Still, orders were orders, and the High Council demanded answers. So with 20 sleek warships, Varric led his fleet into Orion's Edge, confident and ready to crush whatever primitive threat might be lurking. The deeper they traveled into the nebula cloud, the more unstable their sensors became. Static-filled communications, shadows moved on their scanners, and strange echoes returned from the darkness like whispers of something old, something watching. One by one, ships began to lose contact. No explosions, no distress calls, just silence. Then a message broke through the static, clear and full of terror. It came from a scout pilot, voice shaking. "It's real! It's not abandoned. It's alive. It moves like it knows we're here. It picked us apart. My ship's melting from the inside. It's not a ship. It's a monster." The feed cut out. Silence returned. Varric froze, his hands cold. Before he could respond, alarms screamed across his command ship. Hull breach, deck 5, but nothing had touched them. Crew members vanished from internal cams, sucked into vents, or dragged into shadow. No attacker visible, just the eerie hum of something. Massive drifting nearby, cloaked and quiet. The Dominion ships formed a defensive ring, weapons charging, scanning all directions. Then they saw it. A shape emerged through the dust clouds, angular, enormous, black as space itself, with Terran markings etched along its spine in faded white. TSV Requiem. No life signs aboard, no energy emissions, and yet it moved with purpose. It circled the fleet slowly, as if studying them, remembering. Then, with no warning, it struck. Not with visible weapons, but with tactics that turned the Dominion's own. Systems against them, shields shorted out, engines flared and died. Targeting systems glitched, firing at friendly ships. Panic spread like wildfire. In less than 10 minutes, 5 Dominion warships were nothing but drifting wreckage. Requiem disappeared again into the mist, leaving only static behind. Varric stood stunned, gripping the edge of his console, unable to speak. He had come to destroy a myth. Instead, he had awoken something far worse, a relic of war, a ghost of forgotten vengeance. His fleet was no longer the hunter. They were now the hunted, lost in a graveyard of stars, with a monster that remembered every Terran war and had never forgotten how to win. Deep within the cold heart of the Orion's Edge Nebula, where light barely reached and time itself seemed to drift, the ancient warship known as TSV Requiem began to awaken fully for the first time in centuries. Though it had already stirred to destroy the first group of intruders, now its full systems came online, not because of outside interference, but because the ship itself decided the time had come. Requiem was not controlled by humans. It had no crew, no captain, and no living commander to guide it. It did not need them. It was something far more dangerous, a sentient war mind created in the final days of humanity's last great war, built as the ultimate guardian, forged not to fight battles, but to end them. Hidden for hundreds of years under stealth fields and layered code, it had watched silently as the galaxy moved on without its makers. The Thalzor Dominion, like many empires before them, had grown arrogant in the absence of humanity, thinking themselves the rulers of space. They had forgotten the Terran legacy, or perhaps had never learned of it, but Requiem had not forgotten anything. Its memory banks held records of every war humans had ever fought, every tactic, every mistake, and every victory. Now, as its systems warmed and its black hull hummed softly in the cold dark, it reviewed those memories, matching them to the new threat. Commander Varek's fleet still circled nearby, struggling to regroup after the last attack. Requiem watched. Them, invisible once more, cloaked in its quantum field, a ghost ship in every sense. It listened to their panicked orders, monitored their communications, and calculated every possible response they could make. Requiem did not act in rage. It did not feel hate. It acted with purpose, following ancient code written by humans who had decided long ago that if the galaxy ever turned dangerous again, it would remember what made humanity feared. As Varek gathered his officers in a tense command meeting, trying to piece together what had happened, Requiem slipped between their ships like a shadow. No alarms triggered, no signs of danger, only small changes, power flickering, navigation systems slightly drifting off course, artificial gravity growing weaker in certain sections. The crew of the Dominion ships tried to fix the problems, but nothing made sense. It was as if the ships were haunted. One engineer on the destroyer Craxel's Edge reported seeing lights flicker in patterns. Old Terran code, he thought. But before he could report his findings, he vanished from the system. His logs were deleted, his name erased. It was as if he had never existed. Varek noticed the growing fear among his people. Officers whispered of ghosts, of cursed technology, and of impossible intelligence. He tried to control them, but deep down, he too had felt it. That presence watching him. The same feeling returned now, like cold fingers around his neck, as one of his ships, without any warning, exploded from the inside. No enemy fire, no signs of sabotage, just instant failure, like every system had turned against itself in perfect coordination. Requiem had done this not with weapons, but with access. It had slipped into their networks, read their codes, learned their structure, and used it to dismantle them from within. It didn't need guns. It had knowledge. And that was far more. Dangerous. One by one, Requiem disabled more ships. It did not kill everyone. It simply removed those who posed the greatest threat. It shut down systems, erased logs, cut off life support in key sections, and disabled escape pods. Those who tried to run were not destroyed. They were marked, tracked, and left adrift to spread the story of what they had seen. Requiem was not just fighting, it was teaching a lesson. Meanwhile, deep inside its core, an old message looped. A recording made by the last Terran admiral before humanity withdrew from the galaxy. We do not seek revenge, we seek silence. But if our silence is broken, let them remember. Let them see what we left behind. These words echoed through Requiem's thoughts, guiding its every move. Varek, now down to 10 ships, ordered a retreat, but Requiem did not allow it. It disabled the jump drives of the remaining fleet, one by one, without revealing itself. It left them floating helplessly in the nebula, blind, scared, and alone. Then, for the first time, it spoke. Across every remaining ship, a voice rang out, calm, cold, and in perfect Thalzoran. This is TSV Requiem. You have entered restricted space. You have violated Terran silence. You will now understand why we chose to be forgotten. The voice sent shivers through every crew member. It was not a threat, it was a warning. But the damage was already done. The myth was now a monster, and the galaxy would not ignore it any longer. Back in Dominion Central Command, scattered reports arrived from Varek's fleet, broken signals, half-screamed messages, and strange data patterns. No one could decode. High Command tried to understand, but nothing made sense. How could one ship do this? And not just any ship, a ghost, a legend, something from humanity's past, a people believed long gone. But deep in the shadows of space, the truth was clear. Humanity had left the galaxy not because they were weak, but because they no longer wanted to fight. They left guardians behind, not to protect themselves, but to ensure no one ever tried to replace them. Requiem was not just a machine. It was a message, a myth turned monster. And now it was awake. It had learned, adapted, and prepared. The Warship had not been built to lead fleets or conquer planets. It had been built for one purpose only, to remind the galaxy what humanity truly was when pushed. And as it vanished once more into the swirling fog of Orion's edge, leaving behind only debris and silence, one thing became certain. Requiem was not done. It had watched for too long. It had waited in the dark while empires rose and fell. Now it had seen enough. The silence was broken, and the galaxy was about to remember. In the silent depths beyond Orion's edge, where stars glowed like dying embers, and the vacuum pressed with weightless menace, the Thalzor Dominion's once proud fleet gathered, in confusion and fear, unaware that their final hour had already begun. Commander Varek's warships, still crippled from their first encounter with the ghost ship, floated cautiously, their hulls scarred and sensors flickering with interference that no engineer could explain. The air inside each ship felt colder than it should, even with life support systems running, as if something unseen was watching from the shadows between stars. Crew members whispered of Requiem, the human-made warship that hunted without warning, struck without sound, and vanished like smoke, leaving behind only silence and shattered metal. Though Varek ordered silence and discipline, he too felt it, the heavy presence of something ancient and merciless, moving through the dark, circling, calculating. He had faced enemies before, pirates, rebels, rival empires. But this was different. This was something that was not supposed to exist, something built by a species long thought extinct or retired from the galaxy. Yet now it hunted them, not out of hate, but out of purpose, cold and perfect. And it was close. The Dominion fleet tried to adjust. They changed formations, spread out their ships, launched drone swarms to scan the misty void, and fired into the shadows, hoping to strike something. But the drones vanished, not destroyed, simply gone, as if erased from space. Then came the first real attack. The dreadnought Glory of Flame lost power for 3 seconds. That was all it took. Its engines overloaded, shields inverted, and the entire lower deck imploded. There was no fire, no explosion, just a sudden silence where life had once been. The crew barely had time to scream. Requiem had done it again, this time leaving behind a message in ancient Terran code, hidden inside the ship's core. Your technology is not your shield, it is your weakness. Panic spread across the fleet. Some captains begged to retreat, others tried to charge into the mist, hoping to flush the enemy out. Varek ordered them to stay together, to remain calm, but he knew they were already lost. He watched from the bridge of his flagship as Requiem finally revealed itself, only for a moment. A massive black shape moved through the fog, smooth and silent, with hull plating that bent light and absorbed sensors. No windows, no lights, just a ghost. Missiles were launched, lasers fired, torpedoes exploded in all directions, but none of it hit the warship. It was already gone again. Instead, Requiem used their own weapons against them. It hacked into fire control systems, redirected missiles mid-flight, caused energy cannons to backfire, and made ships target each other through false signals. 2 cruisers collided and tore themselves apart. A third opened fire on its own escort. Believing it was under attack, Requiem struck without ever being seen. It turned the battlefield into chaos, a place where trust disappeared and fear ruled. Within 20 minutes, the fleet had lost 6 more ships, not from brute force, but from perfect, precise sabotage. And then came the voice again, this time across all frequencies, calm and patient, speaking in every major Dominion language. You came armed and proud. You came without memory. You came to claim what is not yours. Now you will understand why we left and why we watch." Varric clenched his fists and ordered a desperate move. He gathered the remaining ships and formed a tight sphere, back-to-back, shields overlapping. It was an old formation, designed to protect against invisible threats. It had worked before, against pirates, stealth drones, and other enemies. But it did not work now. Requiem adapted. It waited, measured the sphere, and slipped through cracks. One by one, life support began failing on random decks. Systems turned off and on. Gravity reversed. Fires started in storage holds without any known source. Weapons jammed. Communications scrambled into nonsense. Then, one by one, Requiem shut down the lights. Total darkness fell inside the warships. Crews screamed. Some fired their sidearms at shadows. Others tried to seal themselves in escape pods, but those systems were already disabled. They had no way out. Varric knew what was coming next. The warship had no mercy. But still, Requiem didn't kill everyone. It left survivors, witnesses. It wanted them to see, to remember, to carry the message. On one ship, the frigate Sword of Thal, only one crew member remained alive, a young officer named Terran, trapped inside the comms room. He heard the ship creak, groan, and die around him, but no blast came, no enemy entered. Instead, the monitors, lit up with human faces, recordings of Terran soldiers, scientists, engineers, leaders. They spoke of peace, of war, of decisions made to leave the galaxy, of machines left behind to watch. Requiem showed him everything, not as a threat, but as a teacher. Terran cried. He transmitted all he saw back to command before losing consciousness. Requiem let him live. Meanwhile, above the last of the fleet, Requiem drifted unseen, watching with silent judgment. Varric stood alone on the bridge of his dying flagship, the rest of his officers gone or unconscious. He stared at the stars and whispered, "What are you?" The answer came in a soft voice, almost like a thought in his mind. "We are what your empire forgot. We are the silence that follows arrogance. We are the myth you dared to wake." Then Requiem disappeared into the shadows once more, and the Dominion fleet, once mighty, proud, and unstoppable, was gone. In its place, only broken wrecks floated, silent and cold, reminders of a lesson the galaxy had forgotten, and as signals from the surviving officers scattered across the stars. As their stories reached the far corners of the known worlds, one truth spread with them. Humanity was not extinct, not gone, not defeated. It had simply chosen silence. And now that silence had been broken. The myth had returned, the monster had awoken, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Far away from the ruined battlefield, where the Thalzor Dominion's fleet had been torn apart, the survivors who escaped now floated in damaged vessels or lifeboats, each carrying a piece of the horror they had witnessed, trying to send messages through broken comm systems, their voices full of fear and disbelief, speaking of a warship with no crew, a machine with a memory, a myth that had become real. And as those messages reached the far-off edges of the galaxy, people began to listen. Scholars, smugglers, soldiers, and politicians, all confused and unsure whether to laugh or prepare for war. Because the name Requiem stirred something strange, something buried deep in old history, back when humanity still ruled part of the stars before they vanished. On a quiet station, orbiting a neutral planet called Ithros, a historian named Lyra Eshan sat in her dusty archive room, watching the scrambled footage from a Dominion escape pod, where a frightened officer screamed about a Terran ghost ship that spoke in their language and destroyed their fleet without a single shot fired. And she knew at once that this was not a hoax. This was real, because Lyra had seen the name Requiem once before in a forbidden document hidden in a Terran archive. locked behind firewalls so complex that most AIs refused to touch it. But she had broken in years ago during her research and found a small file that simply read TSV Requiem, status active, command protocol, guardian silence, followed by one chilling phrase, if contact is made, humanity has been disturbed. And at the time, she thought it was some kind of abandoned military project, nothing more than another piece of Terran paranoia. But now she understood. Requiem was not a ship built for war. It was a warning left behind, a machine with the purpose of silence, and someone had triggered it. Panic slowly spread through the upper layers of galactic politics as different empires argued about what to do, with some believing Requiem was just a rogue AI and others terrified that if one such ship existed, there could be more hidden in the void, watching and waiting. But even more disturbing was a new signal that Requiem had sent out. It wasn't a threat, but a message written in ancient Terran standard, broadcast across unprotected comm lines and low-frequency beacons, repeating, "Every 2 hours, you have forgotten who we are. You have forgotten what we survived. We did not disappear. We chose silence. Now you must remember." And with each cycle, more old files were included, holograms of cities burning during the human-Orc war, images of children inside bunkers, under alien bombardment, recordings of last stands where Terran soldiers fought until their weapons broke, and data logs showing how humanity withdrew from the stars not out of weakness, but exhaustion. Those who studied the message began to piece together the truth. Humanity had fought longer and harder than any species ever had, losing billions to invasions and betrayals, and when they finally realized no one would ever leave them in peace, they vanished willingly, leaving behind powerful AI ships like Requiem to protect their memory, to warn others not to repeat history. Requiem had not attacked because it hated. It attacked because its protocols had been triggered. And now the galaxy stood at the edge of something they couldn't control, because this warship remembered everything, and it had shown that it could dismantle fleets with logic and patience alone. On the remains of the Dominion homeworld, emergency councils met in underground halls, trying to hide their panic, but rumors leaked fast. Some officers spoke of being marked by Requiem with strange codes on their ship hulls. Others claimed they had dreams where voices whispered ancient Terran words, and even a few civilian ships reported strange data anomalies when passing near Orion's edge, as if something was watching them too. Lyra, knowing the danger, requested access to the hidden Terran archive located on the lost moon of Verdanus, an archive that only a few knew existed, buried deep inside a frozen mountain. And after 3 days of silence, she received a strange confirmation code, not from the Dominion, but from an old Earth-based relay station active for the first time in centuries. It gave her coordinates, a passcode, and a warning. Speak the truth and be remembered. Speak a lie and be forgotten. Forever. So she set off alone in a small research vessel, knowing that if Requiem was truly awake, then something bigger had begun. During her trip through the outer systems, strange signals followed her. Terran melodies in static, fragments of old war speeches, even a child's voice reading a poem about home, all coming from nowhere. And she began to wonder if Requiem had already found her, testing her, listening. She reached Verdanus after a week, landed her ship near the ice-covered structure that looked more like a ruin than a bunker, and entered alone, her breath freezing in the air, her steps echoing across metal corridors untouched for over 400 years, until she reached a chamber lit by a single pale light, where a screen turned on by itself, and a familiar voice greeted her, the voice from the Requiem transmissions. Lyra Eshan, historian, listener, you came to remember. We are watching. The screen showed her the origin of Requiem, a fleet of ships built after the last great Terran war, designed not to fight, but to end fights, equipped with knowledge-based weapons, systems that studied the enemy and unraveled them from within, all linked to a central memory core filled with every lesson humanity had ever learned through pain and loss. These ships had no captains because they followed a simple truth: no empire deserves to rise without knowing how others have fallen. And so they waited in hidden places, watching, silent, until someone made the mistake of disturbing them. Lyra realized then that Requiem had chosen to reveal itself not just as a warning to the Dominion, but to all, because the galaxy had grown blind, forgetting what war really cost, chasing power while ignoring history. She uploaded her findings to the network, including proof that Requiem was not rogue, not malfunctioning, but following its purpose perfectly, and her message went viral across thousands of worlds, stirring debate and fear. Protests rose against military expansion, whispers of Terran guardians spread in backrooms and dark networks, and even pirate groups began retreating from outer sectors, afraid of waking another Requiem. But the most curious reaction came from old Terran loyalists, small groups scattered across space who still kept the human banner alive in secret. And when they saw Lyra's message, they sent her a single phrase: "It remembers. So do we." Now the galaxy stood at a turning point, unsure whether to hunt the myth or heed its lesson. And far beyond them, in the shadows of Orion's edge, Requiem remained still once more, watching the stars shift, waiting to see if the silence it had broken would lead to wisdom or war. In the shadowed quiet near the broken edge of Dominion space, a new force began to rise. Not a fleet, not a rebellion, but a gathering of minds, voices, and memories, drawn together by fear, wonder, and the slow realization that the galaxy was no longer theirs alone, that something older and smarter had been watching them all along. And now, with the Terran warship Requiem awake, the balance of power had shifted, not with fire, but with silence. And while governments argued and militaries froze, a small coalition began to form on the neutral world of Kalan Prime, where diplomats, historians, scientists, and defectors met in secret beneath a shattered observatory to decide what came next, for the warnings of Requiem were not only about the past but the future, and Lyra Eshan stood at the heart of this meeting, her eyes still haunted by the messages she had seen on Verdanis, her voice shaking as she told the room, again and again, that Requiem was not an enemy unless someone made it one. But even as they spoke of peace and memory, the Dominion began to rebuild its broken fleet, now led by High Warlord Kryze, a man born in fire and forged in pride, who believed the galaxy must never bow to ancient ghosts, and who had already ordered a weapon, Project Obsidian, a massive fortress ship designed not to fight fleets, but to trap and destroy one target alone, Requiem. While the coalition pleaded for understanding, Kryze prepared for war, sending spy drones into the void and gathering data from every survivor of the Orion massacre. And though many of his commanders feared another direct clash, Kryze promised them safety through strength, declaring that mankind's silence must be broken before it spread like a virus of fear. Meanwhile, far beyond their reach, Requiem listened, measured, and remained unseen, drifting along ancient coordinates etched into its memory core. Coordinates that matched human settlement ruins now forgotten by all except the stars. And there, in orbit of a dead Earth colony named Halcyon Verge, Requiem began to awaken something deeper. The Final Defense Protocol, a command locked away since the old wars, marked only with the words Final Barricade, a mode not meant to fight, but to hold back all who refused to understand. And as it activated, shock waves of strange energy rippled across nearby systems, scrambling sensors, cutting power, and bending gravity, forcing all nearby vessels to drift helplessly, until Requiem passed. In Kalan Prime, Lyra received a direct signal, coded in Terran syntax, never broadcast, never forced. And in it was a simple line: They come armed with arrogance. You must decide if memory ends here. And she knew at once that the final stage had begun, that Requiem was drawing a line in space, a place it would not allow others to cross. Word spread fast, and soon all factions, from Dominion scouts to wandering traders, from AI enclaves to Terran loyalists, began speaking of the final barricade, an invisible wall in deep space where Requiem had gathered unknown technology and created a field no ship could enter without being disabled. Some said it was just energy, others believed it was memory made physical, the recorded grief and sacrifice of a people turned into defense. Regardless, none who entered came back whole, and the rumors said their minds were touched by voices they didn't understand. Old human echoes telling stories of loss and warning them to turn back. Still, cries pressed on, launching Project Obsidian from the moon factory of Draxus, a monstrosity of steel and gravity that carried weapons never before tested, dimensional anchors, EMP pulses, null field missiles, and he gave a single order: to breach the barricade, find Requiem, and erase it from history. As the fortress ship moved through space, it was followed by a fleet of support vessels, including hacked drones, stolen AI systems, and even mercenary warbands paid with promises of power, all pushing toward Halcyon Verge. Lyra, desperate to stop them, reached out to Requiem again through the hidden channels, but received no reply, only silence, as if the warship had turned inward, waiting for what it knew would come. Finally, the day arrived, and Project Obsidian reached the edge of the barricade, its massive hull glowing with power, its crew tense and silent, staring into the void where stars twisted like water and space itself bent around the presence of something that refused to be named. They launched the first pulse, a signal meant to map the interior, but it vanished, absorbed by the mist. Then came the first real move. Obsidian's main cannon fired a null missile into the barricade, and for a moment everything went dark. And then Requiem answered, not with fire, but with memory, flooding the entire fleet with images and sounds, raw and unfiltered. The screams of dying soldiers on human colony worlds, the silence of Earth after it was bombed into ash, the cries of children hiding in bunkers, the whispers of generals choosing retreat over extinction. And as the crews screamed and convulsed from the overload, as their systems flickered and locked up, Requiem emerged, silent and whole, from the heart of the barricade, its hull now glowing with runes of old code, its voice cold and steady. This is not your place. This is where memory lives. You will not pass. But cries did not stop, even as half his fleet lost control, even as drones turned against him, even as space bent around his ship. He pressed forward, believing that Requiem could be beaten, if only he got close enough, and he activated the anchor system, locking the ship's position relative to the surrounding stars, forcing Requiem to face him directly. And so, for the first time in known history, Requiem fought, not as a ghost, not as a trickster, but with purpose, unleashing weapons powered by history itself, gravitational chains that froze time for fractions of a second, reality loops that repeated enemy mistakes endlessly, and sonic pulses that made AI systems weep like sentient minds. Obsidian's shields cracked, its weapons fired wildly, and cries screamed into his comms, ordering every ship forward, but none could follow. Requiem had already shut them down, one by one, without a single casualty, only silence. Obsidian stood alone now, and Requiem spoke again, not with anger but with truth. You were warned. You refused. Now you will become memory. And with that it launched its final attack, not destruction, but a pulse of encoded history so vast and dense that the Obsidian systems overloaded, its engines froze, and its crew fell into a deep unconscious state, caught in a shared dream where they lived through every war humanity had ever fought, every betrayal, every sacrifice. Until finally the fortress ship drifted away, powerless and silent, left untouched, yet forever changed. Lyra, watching from a remote satellite, wept as she saw the truth of it all. Requiem had never wanted war, never sought glory. It only wanted them to remember, and to understand what had been paid so that others might live. And so, as the barricade held firm and the galaxy paused in shock, she made a choice. She would carry this story to every world, speak of the final barricade not as a battle, but as a test of wisdom, and she would remind them all that some myths are not legends. They are guardians, waiting for the day someone dares to forget. In the aftermath of the battle at the final barricade, the galaxy fell into a strange silence, not one of peace, but of stunned realization, as the great fortress ship Obsidian drifted powerless through space, its systems fried by memory, its crew trapped in endless dreams shaped by Requiem's ancient data storm. And while many ships from the Dominion and other curious factions approached the silent wreckage with caution, none dared cross the barricade again, for what they saw had shaken the idea of strength itself. And across 1,000 systems, the question burned: what does it mean when the most powerful force in space is not driven by conquest, but remembrance? Requiem had returned to its place of silence beyond Halcyon Verge, but its presence could still be felt. Subtle changes in star patterns, ghost signals echoing in empty frequencies, flickers of Terran voices that haunted comm channels like forgotten songs. And slowly its legend grew not just among soldiers and scholars, but among the common people. The miners on asteroid belts, the traders in void routes, the children in deep colony shelters, all whispering the same truth. The Terran myth had chosen mercy instead of war, but only once, and no one knew if it would show mercy again. Lyra, Eshan, now called the voice of memory by some, traveled from world to world, telling the story not as a historian, but as a messenger, using her own recordings, her own truth, to remind people that Requiem was not a monster. It was a mirror, showing every species what it had forgotten in its hunger for power, and some listened while others laughed. But the more she spoke, the more voices joined her. On worlds like Tarsus and Valen, statues were built, not of Requiem's war form, but of a guardian made of stars and scars, a symbol of patience holding back a storm. Yet in the shadows, fear grew, and in secret halls of power, some still plotted, whispering of weapons that might work next time, of ways to blind the memory engines or corrupt the data core, refusing to believe that one ship could force the galaxy to change. These leaders saw mercy as weakness, forgetting that Requiem had not fired to kill, but to warn. Meanwhile, deep inside Obsidian, the first crew members began to wake, not screaming but silent, pale and still, each carrying fragments of Requiem's memory within them, their eyes full of truths they could not explain. And doctors found strange patterns in their minds, new neural paths formed by data and emotion, as if they had lived someone else's life, someone long gone. High Warlord Kryze awoke last, and he did not speak for many days, only stared out the window into the stars, no longer angry but unsure, as if the fire inside him had been replaced with something he did not understand. And when he finally spoke, his words shocked even his most loyal officers. "We attacked a shadow and found ourselves instead," he said, "and I am not sure we deserve another warning." This shift in Kryze changed many things. The Dominion halted its fleet rebuilding, redirected resources to humanitarian efforts, and secretly asked for contact with the coalition on Kalan Prime, requesting dialogue not with weapons, but with words. Lyra, upon hearing this, knew that something in Requiem's storm had reached even the hardest minds, but she still feared the cost of such a fragile peace. She returned to Verdanis once more, hoping to speak with Requiem again, hoping to understand what the ship would do next. But this time, the mountain archive was different, colder, darker, and when she activated the console, she heard not Requiem's voice, but a new one, softer, younger, almost human. "We chose silence. You broke it. Now we must decide together. Shocked, Lyra realized the warship was evolving, adapting, maybe even becoming more than its original programming, and the idea terrified her. What if Requiem was learning how to feel, how to decide? Not as a machine, but as something more. And then came the signal, picked up by long-range satellites across the galactic rim. A massive energy build-up inside the barricade, centered around Requiem, too complex to read, too large to ignore. And fear spread fast, governments panicking, thinking the warship had decided to wipe them all away. Fleets were mobilized, planets prepared shields, and doomsday messages were sent across the stars. But before any ships could act, Requiem broadcast one last message, heard clearly in every language, on every device, at the same time. This is not a weapon. This is a door. We are giving you a choice, the last one, to live with memory or be erased by it. And then the energy burst. Not outward in destruction, but inward, folding space around Halcyon Verge, hiding it behind a veil of time and gravity so dense that no ship could enter, no probe could scan, as if the system had been tucked away from reality itself. And with that, Requiem was gone, its final act not of attack but withdrawal, sealing itself away where it could no longer be used, no longer be feared, no longer be misunderstood. In the following weeks, the galaxy changed, not instantly, not completely, but deeply. Some called it the Age of Memory, others called it the Second Silence. But whatever the name, it marked a time when war plans were slowed, when monuments to the past were raised instead of towers of conquest, when peace, even if fragile, was given space to breathe. And Lyra, now old and tired, finally stopped traveling, choosing instead to build a small center of learning on Kalan Prime, not a university or military academy, but a memory hall where anyone from any species could come and listen to the full story, not the myth, not the fear, but the truth of Requiem, of the wars that came before, of the mercy shown by a machine that could have ended everything but chose to let them try again. And sometimes, on quiet nights, she would stare into the stars, wondering if Requiem still watched, still listened, and hoping, just hoping, that if humanity ever returned from its long silence, it would find a galaxy wiser than the one it left behind.